Good morning.
Good morning.
So I didn't know if you all wanted me to go right into the budget. So, or do you all have some questions you want to ask
I
before?
don't know if you've answered a question about the census. Have you answered a question about the census?
I did.
Are you appealing it?
Yeah, we will appeal it. And I think we should, but I think we have to come to some realizations as well. When I looked at the numbers in terms of the vouchers, for example, our voucher program, over 2,000 families directed out of the city through the voucher program. That's real. Those are real numbers. I'm not sure. One of the things I'm concerned about is whether, I passed legislation when I was in Annapolis requiring that if you are incarcerated, it doesn't matter where you're incarcerated in the state, you have to be counted in the jurisdiction from which you come, because 90% of the time you will come back. So we need to make sure that that was done. But the other issue is that I did have conversations with the colleges and universities, and this is the 2015 year was the lowest enrollment for most of those universities, from Coppin to Morgan to Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland. But I think they're seeing an uptick now. So I think we'll recover from those numbers. But the reality is that that loss, some of that loss certainly is represented in the voucher program, at least 2,000.
You voucher program, you mean housing voucher?
The housing voucher program.
That may not be a bad thing, they get directed out. Am I correct?
Jane. Jane.
Reality.
But, we have some great neighborhoods. I mean, whether it's Mount Washington or Ashburton, Hamden. So we don't have to direct people out of the city. There are areas in the city. In fact, I've heard some folks say that there were complaints because they can't get back to the city like they're used to, because of transportation issues that we have as a city, as you well know. Just to go to Arundel Mills if you're going, or even work at the hotel in Anne Arundel County. Traveling at certain hours is 2.5 hours there, 2.5 hours back. And when I was talking to one of the developers over there, he said 60% of his workers are from Baltimore City. And the turnover is great because it just takes so long to get there. And we're looking for a transportation director currently, and we really need somebody who understands, one, how to go get federal dollars, two, connectivity, and whether that is federal dollars or international dollars. My friend down in Houston, who became mayor there, was able to lure some foreign dollars to enhance their transportation system. So I think we need to be looking at all of that.
So you said 2,000 more people left?
I think it was about 2,100. Am I correct? Yeah,
Who makes
about.
that decision?
They actually get to make that decision. They get a voucher, and they get chosen. I mean, they can choose the neighborhoods. I mean, the vouchers are in other jurisdictions where they can actually take their voucher and use it.
Section 8 program.
Yes.
I have a non-budget related question. It's about your decision on the minimum wage. And I'm not questioning your intention of protecting jobs or businesses.
I don't think that was the intention,
Right.
period.
Okay, right. So, but some have questioned the conclusions of the reports you cited with the CBD report, along with the fact that other cities that have raised their minimum wage.
Do you realize that we're raising our minimum wage? Do you know that?
Right.
And that we are on target to continue to raise the minimum wage. First of all, I think it's couched wrongly in the first place, and that there is a bill at the state. And if you know anything about the state legislature, it takes a period of time in which these bills pass. So when we pass this bill, the minimum wage has been increasing now since 2015.
Right.
So I don't have the study that you're looking at, so I can't answer the question regarding the study that you have in front of you. So let me get to the budget, and then I'll answer any other questions. Okay?
We're just going to talk about the budget and then your questions.
Okay.
So you all saw that before the Board of Estimates, we submitted our budget, and I'm going to have our budget director talk specifically about some of the things that we're looking at. You know that Taxpayers Night will be held on April the 12th, and agency heads will have a look at it April the 18th. And we're also really focused on giving people in the community an opportunity through a process that we call Open City Hall site that they'll get to look at. The board will vote on the proposed ordinance around May the 3rd. My priorities in the budget certainly are around youth and education. As you well know, I said to folks, we came into this position unaware of the deficit, the structural deficit, And so we've provided funding in this budget for over the next 3 years because, as I said before, this is not going to be a one-year fix when we think about the report that we're waiting on the Kerwin Commission to provide us with to fix that gap. While wealth in our city is increasing, the poverty gap has also increased. So our $180 million is there. What you don't see in the budget, and I want you to make note of this, is that we will get another $5.4 million for our schools through the user, the highway user revenue for bus transportation for our young people. So that will go into, we will add that to our school budget. You don't see that in this budget as of yet. So the youth fund will be not touched by us because it was given through ordinance, and they will make their decisions, and hopefully we will make sure that it's transparent and that the money is directed towards youth programs. You can see in this budget that we will extend the library hours, which I think are important for our young people. We have also committed to building more recreation centers in the city through our capital budget. I came midway into this budget. The process was already underway. And so I've made some changes in the budget, and I think they are reinforced. I want to make sure that crossing guards continue to have their jobs and are paid. I want to make sure that the libraries stay open and that we pick up the trash and clean up our city. And so that's our focus this year. We are working with the police department to curb their overtime. We will bring in some experts as well to help them with their fiscal responsibilities to the citizens of Baltimore. The other thing that I think that you all should know when to think about, because I've had this conversation with the police department around overtime, and part of overtime is events in the city. I mean, that's not the largest portion of it, but they're events. When we think of, we've got 9 days of Light City, which I'm really excited about, but that's 9 days of overtime by our police officers. When you think about Artscape and all of these other events, that's overtime for our police officers that take somebody out of patrol into these particular areas. And so I think we got to look at that and couch it differently, but I also think that the city just can't continue to give away its services. Someone said to me, when I think about the Baltimore Marathon, when I first initiated, having written the contract, one of the things I said was that every expense must be paid for before anybody reaps profits. And 60% of the profits from the marathon was to go to the contractor, and 40% was to be returned to the city. And that's how it operated for the first 5 years that I was on city council. So when we're raising money to do events, we've got to take in consideration the other expenses that the city has to pick up. Picking up trash is reality when all of these events are said and done, and cleaning and making sure that people are safe in our streets is important. I did want to say one other thing, and that's not budget related, and it's in reference to Victorious, the young man who was killed, who was a Baltimore Design School student. Most of you all know I started the school some 7 years ago, and he started school in 6th grade there at the Baltimore Design School, and so this really is painful. I get to do the first graduation speech. It's my first graduating class from the Baltimore Design School, and he won't be there. He was due to graduate this year. He was one of the 126 first group of students who walked in our doors, and I remember hugging him a few times. Tall, nice-looking young man who was happy about being at the Baltimore Design School, and it is with deep regret that this has happened, and I offer my sympathy to the families. But again, I'm talking with groups and organizations about how we curb the violence in our city and take responsibility for our children and get these guns off our streets. This is not, guns aren't play toys. You don't shoot and people get up the next day. This is not a movie, nor is it this is real life. And so we've got to teach our children, begin discussions around violence and how we change this story, change this paradigm. It just can't continue. It is just overwhelming what our city faces on a too often, just too often. So let me have Mr. Klein address you all, and I'll be here for some additional questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good morning. Got some slides to show you. Okay, so let's start with the top line. Operating budget, $2.8 billion, increase of $140.8 million over the fiscal 2017 adopted budget. That's a 5.3% increase. Capital plan is $1.1 billion, and as I've explained in the past, capital budgets they fluctuate quite a bit depending on grants, timing of projects, timing of debt issuance. This is a particularly large capital budget for us, and you'll see much of it is in water, wastewater, and stormwater through revenue bonds. So total budget $3.9 billion. The general fund $1.8 billion, about $61 million increase, 3.8%. I want to talk a little bit about so $60 million of the operating increase is in the general fund, $80 million in other funds. Those include about $40 million for water, wastewater, stormwater. The Board of Estimates last fall approved a 3-year rate increase plan. It's 9.9% a year for water, 9% for sewer each year, and that's mainly to address the long deferred capital needs of that system, those systems. $12 million for the youth fund. That's a special fund separate from the general fund. State funding is increasing by $11 million. A large part of that is a second round of the customer investment fund. This was related to the Exelon merger. The city received $53 million over 3 years. That ended in 2016. There was another round of funding recently, and this is mainly for energy efficiency type projects, weatherization. The Mayor alluded to some good news we got this past week from Annapolis. That's not yet included in the budget, but will be. The $5.4 million that will go to MTA to provide transportation to students. $2 million in support for implementation of the DOJ recommendations. Also, the $3 million for libraries that had been threatened in the governor's budget. We are going to get that, and we'll have $750,000 in local funding to match that. Casino funding is up significantly with the opening of the Prince George's Casino, and so overall about a $7 million increase, and that's the Park Heights impact area, Horseshoe, and table games. Table games aid is split 50-50 between school construction and recreation facilities. Some of that money will actually be going into the Cherry Hill Recreation Center project. We also have the Cahill Recreation Center project funded in the capital budget. I want to say a few words about federal funding. This budget plan includes $230 million of federal funding, $180 in operating, $50 in capital. The president's so-called skinny budget would have a very significant impact on the city. Just a few examples. It eliminates community development block grants. We receive $19 million, and that goes to housing, job training, recreation, a number of other programs. $3.3 million in home funds. We've created 7,000 low-income housing units over the past 25 years through that program. Also cuts funding for meals for seniors, arts grants, our community action centers would be impacted with the community services block grant reduction. So a long way to go with the federal budget. Some of those impacts wouldn't happen until fiscal 19, since we're on a different fiscal year than the federal government. But just wanted you to be aware that we are tracking that carefully, and we'll certainly be letting people know what the impacts are on the city. I want to say a quick word about the budget book cover. This mural is called New Day. which is fitting for Mayor Pugh's first budget. This is at 1137 Harford Road, and the artist is Jesse Unterhalter. So we started this planning process looking at a 20 million shortfall. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We're providing 22.4 million in bridge funding for schools. This is the first installment of a 3-year, $90 million plan, and that will include, starting in fiscal 19, 10 million in maintenance of effort increase, so that becomes a permanent increase in funding for schools. The mayor mentioned the youth fund. That's new. It was approved by the voters last fall. Excuse me. And that's 3 cents per $100 of assessed value of property in the city. We are shifting funding from police to education and youth development, and I'll show you a slide explaining what funding for police and youth development looks like in this budget. We're continuing property tax reduction. I also have a slide I'll show you on that. Overall, most of our city services are at current level funding. We've also included 10 million of new dollars for implementing the consent decree in this budget. And I'll also be talking to you about some new initiatives of the mayors that are included in this budget. So looking at the budget gap, and this was our estimate back in the fall when we started the process. We were projecting $56 million increase in general fund revenue and $76 million in increased cost to maintain the current level of service. Just a few highlights: 2% pay increases for employees. It was $20 million. We also had increase in maintenance of effort. The youth fund at $12 million. We show that here as an investment. It actually is a reduction of revenue because that money will go into a separate fund, but it's still a cost to the general fund. I mentioned the 10 million for the consent decree. One thing that's not on here is we do have 6 million now in our current level of service budget for the Charm City Circulator and supporting that, in addition to its dedicated funding. And then in terms of extraordinary inflation, continued increase in pension and employee and retiree health benefit costs, as well as the cost of drugs for EMS. Our EMS volume has increased. A lot of that's due to the Affordable Care Act. People having health care coverage, they're more likely to call 911 when they need help. And overall, in terms of the pie chart, just want to talk a little bit about fixed costs. Fixed costs, if we go to the next slide, they're holding at about 45% of the general fund budget. And these are the components: pension, retiree health, our required contribution to the schools, debt service. Other includes workers' compensation, insurance, utilities. So these are costs that are difficult for us to control in the short term. We've done a lot to control them over the long term. This is actually, 2018 will be the last year of phasing in the 5% employee contribution to our civilian pension system. And so employees are now paying $16 million of the cost every year for that system. The largest source area of growth the last 2 years is maintenance of effort for the schools. Okay, Jane, you're going to like this.
I've already looked at it. I had to look at the line items, I gotta tell you, okay?
So
Tell us in the detail.
this is a milestone, historic moment. Our funding for education and youth development exceeds the police department budget. And you can see we've shown some of the components. We've grouping things together, but education, and the schools and Head Start being the largest portion. Education and arts grants, 23 million. Health, wellness, and safety, 64 million. youth recreation, 39 million, and then employment development and library programs at 24.2 million. So about 513 million for youth and education and youth development versus 497 million for police. This is all funds, including capital. And I wanted to point out that what's kind of pushed education youth development past police. One is the mayor's commitment for bridge funding for the schools. Another is the youth fund. And then on the other side, the mayor is calling for more accountability for police spending. She's called for a 5.5 million reduction in the police department's base budget, in addition to getting the overtime spending and overtime deficit under control. We're working with the police department on the details of how that reduction will be taken in this budget. We don't have those details yet, but we will have them when the board approves the ordinance of estimates in early May. Looking at the property tax rate, so the general rate is staying at $2.248 per $100 of assessed value. You can see it's been there since 2014, but we're also continuing to implement the targeted homeowners tax credit, and that tax credit applies to owner-occupied properties. And so the numbers on the blue line represent what we call an average effective rate. The tax credit applies a little differently depending on the value of the improved portion of your property. And so the average effective rate in 2018 will be $2.10 per $100 of assessed value, and that's 7% below the 2012 rate. And we're on track based on the schedule that we started with to get to 20 cents by 2020. This program, this tax credit will cost $26 million in 2018. 11.5 million of that is coming from casino lease revenue. The rest is absorbed by the general fund. So looking more broadly, property tax still makes up nearly half of the general fund revenues. Income taxes have been growing as a share, and I'll talk a little bit about that. They're a little over 19%. Highway user revenues, 7.7%, and state aid, mostly income tax disparity grant, makes up 5.6%. So those are the largest slices of that revenue pie. Next slide. So since property tax is such a big portion of our revenues, I wanted to spend a few slides looking at property tax revenues. You can see the Great Recession period. We, thankfully, the way property taxes are administered in the state of Maryland, they really served as a parachute for us during the Great Recession. And we had 4 consecutive years of declining property value, but our actual revenues only dropped in one year in 2013. And you can see now we've had 4 consecutive years of growth and 18% revenue growth since 2013. So if we drill down, Group 2 was assessed for 2018. That's the middle band of the city. Overall, 6.2% increase. That was made up of a 3.5% increase in residential and 9.5% increase in commercial. It's important to note, though, that within that residential number, more than 40% of properties lost value. So that's actually a drag on revenue in 2018 because a reduction in value is reflected immediately on your tax bill, and increase is phased in over 3 years. And so you can see the phase-in of this is 2.1%. But again, after 4 years of, here's the end of the housing bubble, 75%. 4 years of decline, 4 years now of increased value. So that's good news. This is the total revenue picture, and again, you see the the Great Recession years. This is, we passed the $50 million revenue package to help us balance the budget in the worst of those years. Some of these years, it's a little uneven, partly because there were years where, due to snowstorms, the unrest, we used rainy day funds or other fund balance. But current revenues have been on an upward slope, and particularly the last couple of years. Income tax has increased 14% since fiscal 2015. A couple things going on. Obviously, the broader economic recovery, employment has improved. Within the city, you were talking earlier about the census. I don't know the accuracy of those numbers. We've certainly been looking at that data, but one thing we do know is that going back to 2010, even though population hasn't really increased in the city, there's been a change in the composition of the population. We have 13,000 more households earning 50,000 or more, and 13,000 fewer earning under 50,000. And so, clearly, that's reflected in very strong income tax growth. And in fact, historically, the rule of thumb was Baltimore income taxes grow at half the rate of the state. Now we're growing faster, and our personal income has grown faster than the region, going all the way back to 2000. So again, this is good news. Economy improving. Being in finance, we're always worried about the next recession. We're very far into this recovery. We're also concerned about what's happening with fiscal policy in Washington. Those are concerns that keep us up at night. Just want to say a few things about some initiatives in the budget. Again, most services are funded at current levels. No significant service reductions. The mayor brought to us a number of initiatives focused on safety, job opportunities, and cleaning the city. And in terms of job opportunities, we're going to be putting mobile workforce centers on the street. This is one picture we found from Detroit. And so they will provide job placement services and take them directly to underserved neighborhoods. Be More Bright is a partnership with BGE. This will accelerate the installation of LED lights, which are more energy efficient, across the city, and also add 6,000 new street lights of various kinds in areas where darkness invites crime. Next slide. We're going to expand the Big Belly cans to all of our business districts. This will combat the corner can overflow problems that we have. Yep. And finally, a small haulers initiative. This is giving the small haulers a central location to dump commercial waste, and it'll cut down on illegal dumping and also misuse of our citizen drop-off centers. Capital investment, our planning director, Tom Stoser, is here. Just going to show you this slide. This is, like I said, this is a large capital budget. 77% is water, wastewater, and stormwater. As you know, we have ongoing projects related to the wastewater consent decree. We're making progress on replacing or repairing water pipes, and the stormwater fund is now in a position to begin issuing revenue bonds, and so you'll see more stream restoration, flood control type projects. Some other highlights. $22 million in the budget for street resurfacing, $17 million for school construction, $9.5 million for rec centers, and that's for, most of that is for Cherry Hill and Cahill projects, and $6.5 million for home ownership incentives, and that includes a $3 million contribution to the new Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so the budget is online at budget.baltimorecity.gov. You can follow us at Baltimore Budget on Twitter, and we'll be tweeting facts about the budget all day today, and we'll keep going until you get sick of us. And hopefully you'll find that informative. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer questions.
Can you break down the contribution to the police required pension, employee pension, post-retirement health benefits, and then, also workers' compensation?
Sure.
Like in terms of actual numbers.
Yep. I think I've got that. Yeah. Okay, so for fiscal 18, total pension, 181 million. I think 75 million of that is the civilian. And you asked about retiree health benefits. Yeah, 66 million. Workers' comp is at 46 million. Is there anything else that you?
No, that's fine. And do you still contribute to that fund for post-retirement health benefits, or is that still going on?
The OPEB trust fund?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We contribute. So we obviously pay claims for current retirees, and we also try to provide additional funding to the OPEB trust fund. We've brought the unfunded liability there down from, about $2.5 billion to $750 million. So and that's been through reform of our health benefits program, as well as making contributions over and above what we call pay-as-you-go claims costs to the OPEB trust fund.
There was a $20 million shortfall before the budget process started.
Yeah.
How was that closed? Was that closed through higher revenue projections, or were there cuts that haven't been highlighted?
So a couple of the main things that help close that gap. We recognize more revenue from restoration of the traffic camera program. Going in, we were very cautious. We were only budgeting enough for the administrative expenses of the program, which is about $3 million. As we got more comfortable that DOT was on track to get the program back up and running, I think they're going to start testing in May. We added $5 million in revenue, and so that was a help. We're shifting the full cost of street sweeping to the stormwater fund. We have plans in the works to refinance the loan on the convention center hotel, so that that debt service doesn't draw on the citywide hotel tax. So those are a few of the things that helped us close that gap.
What is the status of that?
Yeah, what is the savings
The site
specifically? Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
no, it's okay, same question.
About $2 million
2 million
to the general fund.
So is the site-specific hot tax for the hotel still being used for debt service?
Yes.
And to what extent, what are the numbers given?
I think that's about, because it's a combination of the TIF and the site-specific hot. I believe it's 2.5 is the site-specific hot, and about 5 from the TIF.
Okay, thanks.
And what's the savings on or the shift on the street sweeping? What's the figure on that?
So that's 2.6 million.
2.6?
Yeah.
And we mentioned the federal, keeps you up at night.
Yeah.
There was a comment.
Doesn't really. I'm a pretty good sleeper, but yeah.
By the Attorney General this week about, in Maryland in specific, what's your takeaway message from that and the potential impact to this budget?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry. I missed part of your question.
Oh, the Attorney General had a press conference in D.C. this week talking about possible fiscal, penalties to states, mentioned Maryland specifically. And, what's your takeaway from that particular singling out of the state, which would trickle down to the city?
I need to learn more about that specific issue. I did tell you about what I do know in terms of potential impacts of the President Trump's so-called skinny budget on the city based on the programs that he would eliminate in order to fund more defense spending. And we have $230 million of federal funding in our budget, and again, all those impacts aren't going to happen in 2018. CDBG impact will be 2019, for example, but that's $19 million. And then you add the CSBG that basically fully funds our community action centers and the home program that we use to develop low-income housing.
On that CDBG cut, even though it's in fiscal year 19, is there a reduction in the housing authority budget? I know that that's mostly federal, but in the whole housing funding, that HCD, talk about that a little bit because of the impacts of the federal cuts
Right.
and possible restructuring of that department.
I'm not aware of reductions, specific reductions to HABC's budget. I know the overall HUD budget, I think, is going to be cut by 19%. And we know about some of the specific program eliminations, but there's a lot that we don't know yet about how HUD would absorb that kind of a cut.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, there are programs like the RAD program, which is a federally funded program that helps to rehabilitate these housing projects. And it hasn't been reauthorized yet, but I am meeting with the federal delegation. I think we're going up until tomorrow, actually. So I met preliminarily with some folks around this particular issue, because that really is important to us, because we've got projects that we can't do anything to because we just don't have the money. I met with the Housing Authority Board, and that was one of the things that they asked us to please advocate for. And earlier last week, I had about 30 investors who came to talk about wanting to invest in Baltimore. And they also asked that as we go to Washington that we ask for the reauthorization of the RAD program.
What is the status of the new housing commissioner?
Did it get confirmed yet?
And also the head of the HABC?
Oh, you mean our housing?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's looking at me. I was like, I thought you were talking about over in
Ben
DC. I thought Ben was already, okay. We're still looking. We have so many applications, and I'm comfortable right now with where we are with housing and community development, but we have probably at least 40 applications from around the country. Yesterday, so that position, we're pretty close on Parks and Recreation as well. We're down to, I think, about 4 candidates. Transportation has been a little bit more difficult. We're still looking at, interviewed a couple people on yesterday. We are really looking for a top-notch transportation person. We've got a plethora of housing people, so no worries there.
Madam Mayor, I know in the past the previous mayor talked about the traffic camera program as being about public safety and reducing accidents and such. In this budget, it's portrayed as a way to help close the budget gap. I mean, how has the expectation for the program changed since it's now considered a revenue-producing?
Well, I think it's always been considered a revenue-producing tool, but it's also a tool that helps us to slow down traffic. It makes our city streets safer. I mean, they have them in all of our surrounding jurisdictions, but certainly we'll be grateful for the revenue. But one of the things that we look at this, and Ms. Klein has cautioned me on this, because as people get used to the cameras, they will slow down. They will stop running red lights, so it becomes almost regressive. So it's not something that we want to depend on for revenue. We really want to grow our city to increase our revenue.
Mayor, you said that you want a $5.5 million cut to police overtime, right? But the police budget is increased by $17 million. And so how do those two things square? How can...
Yeah, I can talk about that. So, well, first of all, the 5.5 million.
Did he do that? We go back and forth a lot.
The 5.5 million is actually a base reduction. The overtime issue, we're running large overtime deficits. So the key next year is, the police department has to stay within its budget, but this is going to be a lower budget than current level of service. So what you see in that growth We did build in 2% pay increase. We're still negotiating with the union, so that could end up in a different place. It does have funding for the consent decree built in, and those on a budget that large, a couple percent for pay increases. There's pension increases that go into that as well as the consent decree. That's what's making up that
So
increase.
it would be 22.5 million just
Right.
from salary and pension increases
Yes.
were it not for this.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean,
Well, what is the overtime Senate for this fiscal year in terms of budget?
Well, the budget is going to be the same. It's 16.5, and the issue with overtime is you can exceed overtime as long as you have vacancies to offset that, and they got to manage within their budget. That's the bottom
So
line.
in the FY18 budget, there's 16.5 million.
For sworn overtime,
for
yep.
overtime.
Mr. Klein, how much money in the police budget, how much money is set aside for the surveillance program?
You talking about the airplanes?
Correct.
Nothing.
nothing. No.
You talked about small businesses. How much is committed to helping small businesses? That's a new program, or talk a little bit about that?
So we have funding for our small business resource center, minority and women's business enterprise program, the emerging technology centers, and I think those programs together, along with our main streets and BDC's other efforts to reach out to our smaller business districts outside downtown. I think that's about 4.4 million in this budget.
I should also add that I had a meeting on, I think it was last Friday, with a group of bankers here in the city to talk about creating additional funds for the stimulation and expansion of small businesses in the city. Now, we've not come to a meeting of the minds yet in terms of what that should look like, but they certainly are willing to look at that.
And then you mentioned you're funding the mobile units and the 6,000 new lights. What are the line items for those?
So we included $1 million for mobile units, and the number we don't know for sure. That was based on 3 to 4 units, where I know the mayor's working on getting funding for the actual vehicles themselves, so we're funding, equipping, staffing, and then I think it's about a 1.2 million increase for the Be More Bright initiative in fiscal 18.
Mayor, what does this budget say about you? I understand that some of this was already in the works. What does this budget say about you, like your priorities and philosophy?
Commitment to youth, absolutely a commitment to youth. Transparency and holding department heads accountable for their budgets. A commitment to getting people working in our city. As you well know, 76,000 people unemployed in our city. And that's why the mobile units are important. Focus on youth, and because I continue to say that we've got to get to the root of the problems that our city is facing. Unemployment is absolutely a major issue. Making sure our children have proper recreation facilities and educational opportunities. And the other thing that I've said, while we are continuing to fund our Youth Works program, last Thursday, I think it was, I had every department head here, sitting here, and telling us what their department's commitments are to our youth program. I'm not talking about just taking them. I'm talking about making sure you got youth working in your agencies. And I've also asked them to create year-round opportunities for young people to work. And so every agency, I can't remember what that total was, sat here, and Jason said it was the first time. He said he was really excited about the enthusiasm of those sitting around the table to employ our young people. So for me, it's about supporting the young people and getting people to work. And we're also working on this whole issue around homelessness and what that should look like moving forward. Identifying areas where we can do homes for the homeless. I think are really important. It was interesting having a conversation with the Housing Authority Board. And one of the things that they continued to emphasize was that, don't look at us as though we're housing of last resort. And I say this often. When you think about the income levels in our city, and you think about the struggles of many of the people, and you think about the folks who are homeless, and you think about the people who aren't working, we still got to provide housing. And so, and you don't know whether it's going to take them a year, 2 years, 3 years, or maybe it's 10 or 20 years before they really get it together. And that's why even in my little participation at this stage of the game at the national level, I keep saying this conversation around housing and Section 8 has to change because poverty is real, not just in our city, but throughout this nation. And what's his name? I remember the housing director up in Philadelphia. I mean, you can't tell public housing from the rest of the housing that's been developed. And people take more pride in that, and that's what they were emphasizing. But again, that's why the RAD program is important, that we get those federal dollars. They pointed out that even in some of our housing developments, and Pete told me he went and took a look, I think it was Albemarle Square, where they built the public housing, but no place for young people to play. Nothing.
But
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't raising the minimum wage go a long way to addressing the poverty?
No, it doesn't. But we are raising the minimum wage.
Right.
As again, you know, the fight for 15 goes out to 2026. I would hope that folks who are now making $10 an hour or $9 an hour or $15 an hour in the next decade are making a lot more than $15 an hour. And so, you know, I'm more in tune with the fight for 50 so that we can get people trained to the real jobs that are available in this city. And, you know, you go over on Fort Avenue and you see all of these technology companies that are growing, and you hear from the biotech folk who can't get enough well-trained people to take those jobs. And I do support the minimum wage. I support it in Annapolis. We've raised it. We're on target to continue to raise it. And the city council bill that started with 1010, we've already done that. We did that at the state level. That 1010 wage has already been there. It's already there for July 18th. The council didn't do that. The state did it.
I had a follow-up. So I looked at the CBD report, and it looks like...
The who report?
The report by the city about the possible impact.
I didn't base my decision on the possible impact of the CDC report. I based my decision on the fact that when I talk to my surrounding jurisdictions, nobody is raising the minimum wage, and not past where we are. They're raising the minimum wage like we're raising it currently on July 1, like we're raising it next July. And that's where we all are. And so we're working together, and we will be pushing just as hard as we can at the state level. But, you know, nobody wants us to stand here alone because we've got too many people who are unemployed in our city.
Okay, I understand that, but there's been peer-reviewed studies by MIT and others that have shown that there is no job loss, that the economic impact that you're worried about just hasn't happened. Over 100 places where the minimum wage has been raised, there hasn't.
But it is being raised. You're talking about 2026, so you don't know whether it's going to be raised by 2026 or not.
I'm talking about raising the minimum wage in a city higher than the surrounding jurisdictions.
I'm saying that you don't know what's going to happen in 2026. If you got a barometer that sees where we are in 2026, good luck to you. I don't know that we may be past 15 by 2026. Right now, the bill in Annapolis takes it to 2024. So we'll follow the state.
Next question.
Madam Mayor, with the $90 million in bridge funds, what are your exact expectations that you've communicated to the school system about how you want that money used? What are the results you want produced by that money?
They've got to fix their structural deficit. As you well know, the school system has a $1.4 billion $1.4 billion budget. They've grown, and we've got some great charter schools, but they've grown their charter schools to 30. And they've got to look at the structure. If you've got 30 charter schools with an average of 50 employees, that's 1,500 people. So over here on your public school side, you've either got to downsize or transfer or create some kind of agreement that these people move from here over to here so that you don't have this structural deficit. So, you know, we want accountability and transparency. There's got to be a structure. They've got to fix the structural deficit. You know, I have confidence in our CEO of the school system. You know, she's been there, what, a year and 6 months maybe, and she inherited some major issues, many of those charter schools and so forth, and we're already in place. But we're all clamoring for the same numbers, so we've got to be fair to each other, and we've got to weigh what we're doing.
So do you see charter schools as taking revenue and resources away from regular public schools?
No, I think we have some great charter schools. I think you have to balance. You know, you can't have more. We've got more than the entire state. You know, and there's a reason for that. You know, there's a reason why in Baltimore County they are where they are with charter schools, or Montgomery County and others. You know, we've got some great charter public, because they're public schools. We have some great charter public schools, but we've got to balance. We got to balance what we're doing over here with the shrinking population. And as I said last week, the great news is that the growth is in the elementary school level, and we need to accommodate that.
Mayor, your budget includes the phased-in tax cut, which you had committed to during the campaign, putting it in the 2020. There has also been talk of a more dramatic tax cut. Stephen Walters at Loyola pushes this idea. They look at San Francisco and Boston and see how the population shot up right after this tax cut went in. Have you given any thought to that?
We are looking at, and we're talking to some economists and folks, you know, because there are certain areas in the city that if we don't do something drastic, it's going to take tax cuts, it's going to take revenue, it's going to take programming to focus on areas. Like I was having a conversation with one of the bankers. He said, I just want an area where I can focus on. And I said, well, you know, looking at Druid Heights, for example, I mean, you've got hundreds and hundreds of board-up houses. And so my thought is, can't we offer a lower property tax rate in those areas where we can get people coming back in larger numbers? Can we create the incentives for them to rebuild those neighborhoods? So we're looking at all of that. What is the impact, the economic impact on the city in general? I know we're struggling right now with our overall budget, you know, having to close the $20 million gap. You know, I don't want us to lose sight of where we are in terms of our AA bond rating and how we have to go out to the marketplace. And we're still in a position now that we can go out to the marketplace and attract more dollars for those neighborhoods and communities.
And do you have a response to Attorney General Jeff Sessions? He said he's going to threaten federal funding, federal grants to cities that don't cooperate with.
Did he get confirmed yet? No, I'm only joking. We're watching our federal dollars very closely, and as I said, I'll be meeting with our federal leaders tomorrow. Federal dollars to Baltimore City are very important, and whether it is the RAD funding or the bridge funding or the tunnel funding, all of that stuff is relevant because it creates jobs and opportunities for people in the city. So we're working with our federal partners.
Sorry, would the city rethink some of its policies as far as cooperating with ICE?
No.
The skinny budget that President Trump has put out, most people believe that would not
pass. It will not pass, right.
Right, that's like a
it's just like
document.
right.
It's not a real document, right? But if that were to go through, what would be the bottom line dollar figure on the city's budget? Do we know?
I think you said 200 something
Yeah, I
million.
gave you some examples, but we can't really say because it's just a sketch at this point. You know, there are certain programs that are zeroed out. I mentioned CDBG and home, and you know, that's right off the bat, that's 23 million, and then you go from there.
Just to back to the police budget for a moment, because of things you said last week. The police budget has gone up every year, pretty significantly for ever. I think one year it was maybe level. So based on your statements last week, people may have expected to see a number lower in proposed for FY18 as opposed to FY17, and in fact it's $17 million higher. So we're just trying to understand what's making up that increase.
Well, the 10 to 12 million that we already know. I mean, we don't know. We're trying to prepare for the DOJ, and we don't know what that cost is actually going to be. We estimate around 10 million or so. I mean, that's reality. When we looked at New Orleans, again, half the size of us, that's about what they were spending a year. I mean, so it could be as high as 20 million. We don't know yet.
You're not putting that in a separate line item, you're putting that in the...
No, we put it in the budget.
So if you weren't putting that
If you
in-
took that out, if you took the $10 million out and the $2 million, that's 12 million out of the budget.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, with the re-upping of the traffic camera program, obviously it was taken offline in part because of the inaccuracies in the program. What assurances will the city give the public that these new cameras will be accurate?
Well, they've been vetted, and the contractors have been vetted. We've also had long conversations with other cities in terms of who will be operating these cameras, and so we expect them to be accurate. You know, there is a process if you get a ticket. We're hoping, I mean, while we can use the revenue, again, this is not something that we're betting on Baltimore's success. This will be regressive, that's our hope.
When will they go online? Do you have an estimate?
May?
The testing starts in May,
May, this
so
May?
it's a plan to get them online early in the next fiscal year.
But
Actually issuing tickets.
30.
There's been no contract that I've seen go through the Board of Estimates though yet, right?
And did it go through?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought it had.
What
Yeah.
what firms do they use?
Do you have the firm?
No,
Is
who
it
provides?
Xerox, isn't it? Is it Xerox?
One. There's two, there are two. There are two.
We'll get
They're
that.
two different contractors.
And it's for both speed and traffic?
Speed and
Speed and
red lights, yeah.
So the testing of the cameras will begin in May? Okay. And so
Yeah.
no one will receive actual fines in May?
I think the deployment is going to be April, start the first, I think, 20 cameras, red lights.
30.
And there's a period of 2 months of calibration of the speed cameras that they will come online, I think, in June.
How many cameras?
It's going to be, the estimate is 10 cameras red, 10 cameras, the first deployment is going to be 10 cameras red, 10 cameras for speed. And it's going to be gradually
Ramp up.
growing through the fiscal year,
to be a total of what,
about 50.
50 total?
Mhm.
Do you have the locations of those 20?
We'll get you more information.
Don't tell them.
On the camera project.
Madam Mayor, did you address the issue about the funding that came from the state and how that offset your education budget already for schools?
I'd rather Dr. Sandelisa's, I asked the governor to be supportive. I called him, had conversations with him, and in fact, I saw him as late as Saturday, and he told me that he would be supportive of the school budget. He too wants transparency and accountability, but I think Dr. Sandelisa's could speak well. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.